Welcome to Agency Bytes, a podcast for agency owners, hosted by agency veteran and coach Steve Guberman. Agency Bytes is a podcast focused on delivering actionable agency information from agency experts in about 25 minutes. Why 25 minutes? Because who has the attention span for much more these days? And you can squeeze in a listen between meetings with time for a bathroom break or coffee refill before your next meeting.
Welcome to Agency Bytes, a podcast dedicated to helping creative entrepreneurs thrive. I'm Steve Guberman from Agency Outsight, where I coach agency owners to build the business of their dreams. Joining us today is Jason Kramer, the founder and CEO of Cultivize, a consulting firm specializing in lead nurturing and CRM implementation. With over 20 years of experience, Jason has worked with global and local brands to help bridge the gap between marketing and sales. He's here to share his insights on optimizing the sales process and how to identify poor performing marketing campaigns. Jason, welcome to the show, my friends. Great to see you.
Thank you, Steve, and Happy New Year as well.
Yeah, this is the first episode of 2025 that I'm recording for Agency Bytes. So this is the new year, new episode life. Good to see you, my friend.
All right, a lot of pressure to make it a good interview then.
So it's not the first that's going to be published, but it's the first being recorded.
Yeah,
so that pressure falls on other episodes.
Okay.
People like Jonathan Stark and Armin Vid and Brad Farris, they all came out so far this year, and so Chip Griffin. But you'll come out later this month, and it'll be great. But it's a great time of year to talk sales funnels, CRMs, lead scoring, because every agency that I know of is kind of hitting the ground running like, yay, new year, new goals. Let's, double the agency or whatever the heck we want to do this year. And so right time is what I believe. So talk about Cultivize, man. What are you guys doing over there?
So Cultivize is all about helping businesses of all different sizes. Typically we work with companies that are spending money on marketing. They have at least a few salespeople, right? So they're doing the right things. But what they're missing the gap on, Steve, is the ability to identify, nurture, and convert those leads, right? So they don't have any proper CRM tool, or maybe they have a CRM, but they're not really leveraging its full functionality. Or they might be, having issues where there's like pipeline leakage, right? They are getting really busy. And like you mentioned, like early year, people are coming at them with RFPs and they want to get all these proposals. But then you know what happens? People just say, okay, thanks for the info, and nothing happens. And or it's like, okay, I'm not ready yet. Come back to me in Q2. And if you don't have a system to kind of follow up with all those people and to remind you to follow up, then they're probably just going to go to a competitor. So Cultivize helps businesses develop not only the tools to make that possible, but we really focus on the strategy first and identifying the business goals, the marketing goals, and the sales goals, looking at where those gaps are, where those inefficiencies are. A lot of times the clients we work with, and I'm pointing here for anybody listening to audio, I'm just pointing to my head, but a lot of times business owners and salespeople have their processes in their head. Nothing's really formulated in terms of a plan. And so they're kind of shooting from the hip. They're doing what they do out of behavior. And so that becomes difficult to really manage and to scale, and also to report on to see really what's working and what's not working. So our role is the implementation of that strategy that we provide, building out on various different platforms we work with. We're not agnostic to one platform. And then after that, we do all the implementation, of course, but we stay on board. We become an accountability partner as much as of a coach and a strategic partner with all of our clients. Because you and I both know, Steve, and the listeners probably know too, CRM, just like a website, it's one of those things where you don't build it and it's good for the next 5 years.
Right.
You have to constantly be tweaking it, adjusting it, refining it. And so by us working with our clients every month, we're able to provide that ongoing coaching and assistance and advice on where we need to make some modifications.
Yeah. So starting with kind of what their goals are, what building out systems that will, not systems like platforms, but systems like procedures on how they can utilize a tool like a CRM, and when they should be reaching back out to people, and how to tag things or track things easily.
Yeah, exactly.
It's interesting because I think most professionals start out with a spreadsheet or a whiteboard. This is my CRM. Like my first CRM was a whiteboard.
Hmm.
Then we switched to a Google Sheet. Maybe it wasn't a Google Sheet back then. It was probably an Excel sheet. I don't think Google Sheets existed.
Yeah.
And then we switched to like a true CRM. And that progression is probably very natural for agency owners, business professionals, etc. Do you help identify at what stage to kind of move them through adoption of the right tool for them?
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought that up because there's literally thousands and thousands
Hmm.
of tools out there, right? That do everything, right? From like just email nurturing versus, the sales piece, right? You have like
Yeah.
Pipedrive, which is a great pipeline management tool, but it doesn't do all the other things that a CRM needs to do. And so I think the biggest mistake a lot of companies make and individuals that are even just starting out, they see that shiny object, they see like this cool demo or a video on social media,
Yep.
and it's like a freemium. It's like, oh, get a 30-day free trial, and they just sign up, or it's low cost. Oh, it's only $50 a month. I'm going to do it,
Hmm.
and they're buying software without understanding what their actual needs are and what their challenges and their goals are.
Yeah.
And they're buying it for the features and benefits, not to realize if it could actually solve the problems they have, because they haven't identified the problems they have. And
Yeah.
so I think that's where the biggest misstep is, that companies can jump into technology too quickly, regardless of the type of technology, without fully understanding, okay, these are our problems. What problems can this software solve for us?
Yeah, I mean, it's the same with a car. Don't buy it for the bells and whistles. Buy
Yeah,
it for the longevity and the overall solutions of, all right, I need a bigger vehicle because I have more kids or
exactly.
whatever. What so but even talk about that. Like I was kicking the tires on a piece of software yesterday, thinking, and also talking to a client about it, thinking, all right, this will combine two or three other pieces of software in my
Hmm.
tech stack that don't currently communicate without a middleware. So this one piece will do more than what I need. What are some of those challenges that you're talking about to help identify that software like this could solve for them?
So, I mean, we have a on the Cultivize website, we provide, it's actually free that we do as well. It's the CRM fit assessment, and so that's like a secondary step in a way, right? So we have a guide. We actually new ebook we just launched a couple weeks ago. It might sound like kind of like a little cliche, but it's like we call it the ultimate guide to CRM research, and it's not
Ultimate.
comparing
Okay.
any specific CRM. What it's doing is answering your question. It's telling you, here's all the things you should be asking that soft
Hmm.
SaaS provider when you're reaching out to them, when you're doing a demo. Here's all the questions you need to know. And so some of the most common things that are overlooked are, what type of customization can be done with this piece of software to match our unique needs? Or do we have to adapt our business to fit their, and put a square
Right.
peg in a round hole, right? Another one is usability. Like, how easy is it to use? How quickly is our team going to adopt to it? If we have a mobile sales force, do they have a mobile app? Does the app work on their phone, right? If it doesn't, that's a big problem.
Hmm.
Um, Another one that's often overlooked, kind of just two more quickly, is the long-term goals, right? So you might have like that, and like you just sent right now, oh, we have two or three other pieces of software. This one software can help kind of mitigate those other needs and condense everything. What kind of software are you going to need in a year from now, 2, 3 years from now? What are the changes in the business? You might have a sales team of 3. You want to grow to 10 in 2 years. Can the software you're looking to buy of support a team of
Right.
10? Right. And so they're not looking long term. And you and I both know, moving from a CRM to CRM, it's like moving your house. It's a real
Yeah.
pain in the butt.
Yep.
It's not undoable, right? I mean, like, it's not impossible, but it's just a lot of work to do that. So you really want to make sure you're going to be in it for at least a few years or longer, right?
Yeah.
Um, and then the last thing I think that often, almost always, is overlooked is the question about support, especially with like the freemiums and the lower cost products. Support is generally pretty terrible.
Yeah.
It's via email. It takes days for someone to get back to you. When they get back to you, they're not very really answering a question. It's more copy and paste question, solutions. Um, so you want to make sure that when you're working and buying any software, that you can get somebody on the phone that's included. If there is a cost, what's the cost? If it is going to be email, what's the their SLA, what's their service level agreement to get back to you? And then will they even be able to get on Zoom calls? Like, if you need to show them something,
Right.
can you actually, for example, so I use QuickBooks Online. And so I had a problem with my QuickBooks the other day, and I went on with chat with support, and I was doing a screen share, but there's no audio. So the guy is like circling, but I don't know why he's moving his mouse like crazy, like, so I'm like sitting there talking over text and he's trying to explain what he wants me to do. And I was like, is there no audio? He's like, no, we don't have audio. And I'm like,
That's
it's like no
insane.
sense. It would make so much easier to figure this out if I could just talk to you versus me having to chat and watch what you're doing on the screen. So those are the types of things
Yeah.
that I think are a few of them. But like I said, we have a whole guide listing like 20, 30 more things you should be looking for when choosing, a new CRM.
Yeah. Talk about the behaviors more than the software, because I think the behaviors are, I'm a big fan of coaching people through time blocking and ensuring
Hmm.
like every Monday morning for an hour, I'm in my CRM and I'm doing lead follow up or
Yeah.
sending out messages. Like, what are some of the integral behaviors for any CRM spreadsheet, go high level, sharp spring, any of them,
Yeah.
no matter what the tool is, I need certain behaviors to be successful. And what are some of those things that people need to kind of start integrating into their life?
Well, they certainly need to, get out of the bad habits, right? And that can take time.
Yep.
So it's like if you've been going to the gym for years and not seeing much results, you start working with a trainer. It's like, oh, well, you've been doing this wrong or that wrong, and it's like you kind of it's your clutch to go back to what you used to be doing the wrong way, and
Hmm.
so or just the inefficient way. So I think one thing is just not taking on too much at a time, and slowly saying, okay, like what is the top two or three things that I must be doing with the CRM now. Let's not get really ahead of ourselves and run before we could crawl or even walk. So that could be just like, what am I looking at? Maybe like my to-do list, right? Or the activity feed of who's been active on our website in the last 24 hours. Let me look at that every morning and spend 10 minutes looking at that. Maybe creating reminders for myself, right, in the CRM and not just writing them down on a piece of paper when I have this amazing tool in front of me and I'm not really leveraging it.
Hmm.
So what we find is there's like a um, combination where they're still in bad habits because they're using other tools and they're not fully embracing.
Yeah.
Like I've seen in situations where salespeople are using the CRM, but they also are managing a sales spreadsheet as well. I'm like, why do you have the spreadsheet? Like all that information is in the CRM. Like you
Yep.
don't need to have both. You're really just causing more work, but it's their comfort level. It's what they know.
Yeah.
So the way we circumvent that, Steve, just to kind of sum up your question, that's why we have these monthly calls. I look for these bad behaviors. I look for these habits that they're not breaking out of,
Hmm.
and then I just help them to be accountable. Um, if you don't have good management and good like a champion within the company that's going to help push them to get out of these bad habits, it's much more challenging. So
Yeah.
the first thing I try to do is say, okay, in the company, who's going to be responsible to govern the salespeople and make sure that every week, every in their weekly sales meetings, they're not doing the things that we don't want them to do, and they're doing the things we do want them to do.
So top down leadership has to kind of set the stage of what are the health.
100%.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Yeah. And
Yeah.
that's with
Yeah.
all major movements
Of
within a
course.
company.
Yeah.
Yeah. What do you, so again, this is new year, first month of the year. Hopefully agencies are kind of hitting the ground running, like gung ho before it fades out. Like, what are some of the big pushes you're seeing in like changes of outreach or cadence or, changes in CRM or things like that, that agencies should
Well,
watch out for?
I would say maybe not as much about changes, but about looking at past activities, right? So
Hmm.
one thing that I'm a big component on is testing, and so um, you know you might have done whatever you did last year. If you're listening to this interview, whether you did social media marketing, whether you just did some stuff on LinkedIn, whether you were doing a monthly email, if you haven't already evaluated those results, that would be like the first step that I would be doing is saying, okay, like what worked last year,
Hmm.
what didn't work, and let's modify that. I think also aligning like your goals. Like for me last year personally, as a company, we spent a lot of time and money and effort in thought leadership content. We flooded LinkedIn and social media and every other avenue. I've done a ton of podcasts myself, but we also had a lot of other content besides that being pushed out, and that was all to build, you know, the company and myself as kind of like the thought leader in the world of CRM.
Hmm.
But that was the purpose of that wasn't to generate leads; it was just to generate thought leadership, start conversation, right, and dialogue, and build that awareness. January going forward, it's shifted over. So the thought leadership piece is going to be there, but it's not going to be as heavy, right? Because we already now have a strong base for that. and now it's going to focus more on like lead gen efforts. So, you know, that's, I think, what I would say, my answer would be is, rather than any big changes, it's more about a big new change like AI. Everybody's talking about AI. It may not be
Yeah.
relevant for what you're trying to do with you and your business. So rather than just jumping on a bandwagon of some new platform or some new trend, like, does it actually align with your business goals?
So
It's
what
really,
worked, what didn't work, and evaluating the results that have come from any efforts previously. And
yeah,
and so, all right,
exactly.
I did emails, let's say every 6 to 8 weeks, I did an email and I got, 0 leads out of that. But I did, LinkedIn cold outreach, whether it was automated or personalized
Mhm.
or whatever. And I got, 7 leads. And of those 7 leads, 3 of them were really good. And I closed 2 of them or something like that. Like that's what you're talking about as far as evaluating.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
And
This,
don't wait too long. So even if you're like, hey, like Jason, Steve, I haven't done thinking to myself, as we're talking, right? I haven't done any of those things last year. Like, I'm sort of starting fresh. Well,
mhm.
that's okay too. But don't wait until next year to see how things are going. Like, put things in motion, give it a couple of months and see what the results are. If you're starting to see any traction, then okay, maybe you need to make an adjustment. Because I think that's the other pitfall where you say, okay, I'm just going to let it run for 6 months or a year, and I'm not going to really check anything. Well,
Yeah.
then you've just wasted a whole year potentially doing something that has zero results or very little results.
And it could be a simple tweak that can, after 3 months, you can say, hey, if I make this minor tweak and I personalize my messaging a little bit more or
Exactly.
something like that, that can be a force multiplier as opposed to waiting a year and you miss massive opportunities.
Yeah.
Um,
Hmm.
what are some of the metrics, maybe you can talk through that, when people are reviewing their efforts, whether it's lead scoring or metrics of what funnel, stage metrics should look like or something like that?
Well, again, it all goes upon. I think metrics is an interesting conversation, which we probably could talk about for a whole
Yeah.
hour by itself. But in short, metrics are only as good as if it's going to help you make informed decisions. So having a lot of data, I think it's better having less data that's valuable than having more data that's just causes confusion. But you also have to have the technology in place to have those metrics. So,
Hmm.
for example, like you talked about, like LinkedIn or social media, like what percentage of your followers went up? Like how many people subscribed to your newsletter? To your point, how many people did you speak with on, let's say, LinkedIn, right? And so looking at those conversions at a like what was the highest level number and what was the conversion, I think is important. But for me, it's also trying to measure what was the cost to acquire, right? So you mentioned before, if I got 2 leads out of all this effort, well, how much time and money did I spend to get just 2 leads? If I spent 5 grand, that's cost me $2,500 per lead. That might be a lot of money if I'm not charging a lot for my services,
Right.
right? So that's, I think, a really important um, thing to look at too. Is what is it costing you to
Yeah.
acquire those and how much revenue? A proper CRM can track all that for sure. Um, because the reality is things like email open rates or click rates, it
It's
doesn't really
garbage.
mean a whole lot. I mean, quite honestly, I mean, you could have, even if you had a 70% open rate, you still have 30% of people that aren't opening up your email. And then what about the 70%? What did they do? What was the next action? Did they call you? Did you speak to them? Did they book a meeting? So those are the types of things that we want to make sure we help our clients track. And just for your listeners too, I think it's important to know Cultivize as a company does not do any inbound marketing. So I know there's a lot of agencies listening. We are not a competitor to agencies at all.
Hmm.
We focus all on the outbound, right? The outbound communication. The only thing inbound we do is help on the tracking, right?
Yep.
Which AdWords campaign generated the lead, which Facebook, campaign generated the lead, et cetera. That's what we focus on, making sure that the dots are being connected.
Are CRMs tracking the actual, like tying back to campaigns
Absolutely,
versus
they should
lead
be.
source?
Yeah,
Interesting. Okay.
yeah.
I don't know that I've seen that in I use the free version of HubSpot. I don't do
It
any.
wouldn't be there in the free version. You have to pay
Okay.
to get that level of. So
Yeah.
that's the other thing with these freemium models. Like, they don't really. It's
Yep.
not giving you really what the software is designed to do for free. It's giving you very basic. It's like,
Yeah.
here's the car, but we're going to give you the steering wheel. Nothing else.
Yeah.
You're going to
Yeah.
sit there holding the steering wheel, and you're like, all right, I feel
Yeah.
like I'm driving maybe, but I'm not going anywhere. Um,
What are your thoughts on agencies that do amazing marketing for their clients and they don't do it for themselves? How can they best kind of put some of what they know really well for their clients into practice for themselves?
Yeah. Well, I mean, listen, I was guilty of that for years too. I mean, before Cultivize, I owned a boutique design slash web development, agency, and we did very little marketing for like the
Hmm.
first 10 years of business. It was all just word of mouth referrals and things like that. And so again, it comes with understanding, like, I personally think, I mean, to answer that question as honestly as I can, I think it's almost sometimes better to hire like an outside person, even like yourself, right? To come
Hmm.
in with outside perspective, because when you're in marketing and you're trying to market for your own business, you're so close to your own business and to the industry. It's hard to have sometimes an objective opinion on things,
Yeah.
And so, not to say executionally you couldn't execute, but I think having an outside perspective on the messaging about the persona of the audience that you're going after. And I think that's one of the biggest challenges. Most marketing agencies are like, oh, we could do marketing for anybody. Well, you can't advertise to anybody, right? You have to pick a niche, and I think that's the first challenge that a lot of agencies have, is like, I am only going to focus, like you and I were talking before we started, you were saying how you knew some agencies that just help, like, service based, home service based businesses. And like all their clients are all like painting companies,
Hmm.
like that's super specific. The same way that, there are marketers out there that work with like just like medical or dental offices, right? And you could be super, super, targeted in your messaging when you're doing that. But if you're like, hey, we help anybody, then it starts to become very difficult to talk about the pain points that
Yep.
everybody has, because everybody has different pain points.
Yeah, it always comes back, I think, to positioning and messaging, and so many creative professionals fight the niche, and I did for forever as well.
Hmm.
When we leaned into it, it's when it was our force multipliers. When my agency took off, and I see that for so many of my clients that are like, no, we can be all things to all people. No, you can't easily, and it doesn't mean you just need to be the agency for home services or the agency for banking. There can be four, five, six verticals that you own and have messaging tied
Yeah.
tightly to, and so you know where to Gretzky, you know where to go, where the puck is going to be, and where those industries are going, and how to lean into them. And I also agree that so many agencies fight bringing somebody else from the outside to not even like help them like I would from a positioning and messaging standpoint, but do our marketing for us, like lead us through writing
Hmm.
content and delivering content and scheduling it, and allow a freelancer to help or another agency to help. Because if you realize you try and do it yourself and you're not doing it, even though you say you can for everybody else, let, get out of your own way, let somebody else help you.
Yeah, it's definitely a pride and ego thing, I think, for a lot of, especially the owners, and
Yeah.
stuff. But I agree. Yeah.
Yeah. um so you've got some new ebooks coming out, some new tools that you're pushing out that are going to help businesses. You want to talk about that real quick before we jump into some rapid fire questions?
Yeah, sure. So we're super excited. Being involved with CRMs for over a decade. One of the challenges that we're talking about today is the not only the affordability of a CRM, right? You mentioned like the free version of HubSpot, but it doesn't really give you what HubSpot can do. You got to pay for it, right?
Right.
And a decent amount of money, I might add. Um, and even though it's a great tool, not everybody can afford 50 grand a year for a CRM. And so we built a tool. We talked about spreadsheets. It's called Profit Path, and what it is, it's a series of interconnected Google Sheets that allow you to track all of your contacts, your leads, your customers, also your sales pipeline and where things are at in the pipeline, the value of the deals you're working on, the profitability of those deals. So you can actually put in your costs, right? So if you're building a website and you know that your programmers are going to charge 5 grand and you're charging 10 grand, you're only making 5 grand on it. We need to track that. The other thing that's unique about it, it allows you to put in all of your marketing channels, right? So it's like
Hmm.
we're spending X on social media, specifically Facebook, or we're doing webinars or trade shows. We go to BNI or some other networking event. This is how much it costs us every month. The system will automatically, I call it a system as it is, even though it's Google Sheets, it'll track all these contacts you're putting in and put them into the buckets. So it'll tell you how many leads you got from your networking, from your webinars,
Hmm.
from social, and it'll actually tell you how much money it's actually costing you, like, to get each of those leads. So if you had $500 a month for SEO and you only got 2 leads that month, it's $250 per lead.
Right.
But if it's costing you $1,000 a month for SEO, you're kind of, backwards, in terms of
Yeah.
your ROI. And lastly, what it does it'll look at the high level of your pipeline, right? So it'll have in there, how long is it, I'm sorry, it'll have the average size of those deals, right? How much revenue is expected to come in, how far off you from your goal. So it's really a very simple tool. It may sound complex, but it's designed in a very visual way. On the website that I'll give at the end of this interview, there's a link there. You can see about it. You can see a demo. And I'm actually going to be at the end of the show also giving, as I told you, Steve, $50 off. It only costs $199, just to kind of put that out there for lifetime access to
Sweet.
this tool.
Yep.
So it's really built to be affordable for really anybody that's just starting out or needs something simple. Um, the ebooks. So we have a few new ebooks. One of them, as I mentioned, is the CRM guide to understanding what to look for. The other two are really important as well. One is about lead nurturing and understanding the importance of lead nurturing and how to educate people with not be salesy in terms of
Hmm.
your messaging, but what the outcome of lead nurturing is all about, right? And a really, really quick story, if I have maybe 30 seconds, Steve,
Go
just to
for it.
share.
Yeah.
So we do a monthly newsletter at Cultivize. And I had a client about a year and a half ago or so that we were doing consulting for. They weren't like a month to month retainer client. And I noticed that in my newsletter in December, it was promoting another podcast I was on, just talking about that and about CRM confusion and kind of the demystification of things. And I saw that she clicked the link to listen to the show. And then, like a day later, she filled out a form to download this new CRM guide that I just talked about. I was like, well, that's interesting. I'm like, I wonder if
Hmm.
she's in the market for a CRM. And so I called her a day later and I was like, hey, Jen, what's going on? You happy New Year, blah, blah, blah. And it turned out she was actually in the market for maybe looking for a CRM. And she's like, I remembered you. Like, I enjoyed working with you. So my point there is like, if you don't have that's just nurturing, right? That's just me
Yep.
sending an email every month to my entire database. And if I didn't do that, she would have never known about the guy that I just launched, right?
Love
And
that.
she would
Yeah.
have, so that's like a perfect example. And then the
Yep.
last one is about lead scoring. We talked a little bit about that. And the problem with lead scoring is it's very subjective. And what we find is that even really complicated, or I should say that sophisticated CRMs that offer lead scoring, people don't know how to set it up properly.
Mhm.
And so they were giving points for things that aren't relevant, like, oh, because they have a first name, give them 5 points, or because they went to the homepage, give them 10 points. And those things mean nothing. And
Right.
so this guide explains how to use lead scoring in any CRM. And it also gives you for free, a Google sheet with a whole formulation that we put in there where you can put in all the things that you believe are important or moderately important as terms of behaviors, right? Someone doing this, opening that, and then it'll tell you what your ideal lead score should be for someone that would be a hot lead or a warm lead in your system.
Interesting. That all sounds really valuable. And as you're talking through this Google Sheet system, it reminded me of, we were talking about behaviors before, and brought me back to like third grade. My brother was in a school play. I forget what it was called, but there was like a line from it: garbage in, garbage out.
Yeah.
And that has stuck in my brain since like third or fourth grade.
Mm-hmm.
And as it relates to a CRM, whether it's a spreadsheet or any other tool, the behaviors that we adapt and develop and hopefully polish need to directly correlate to the quality of the data that go into these tools, whether they come in automatically through, like you said, ad campaigns or email
Mm-hmm.
systems or user behaviors, or the data that I put in as the salesperson or the marketing person of who they are and what the deal looks like and the costs, things like that. And so, it just reminded me of like how diligent we need to be as sales and marketing professionals to make sure we're accurate and timely and putting the right information into these tools. Otherwise, we get no good. Nothing good is going to come from it, right?
The other thing too that's I think important to note, to just hit on when you mention that, is just notes in conversation. Like
Yeah.
I was talking to somebody a couple months ago, and they're like, let's talk after the new year. Like I'm moving from Connecticut um, to North Carolina, so it's gonna be kind of crazy for me. So I just wrote in them in a note in there, like moving from Connecticut to North Carolina. I never knew if I was going to need to know that, but like it's something he offered as a kind of like free information. And so when I reached out to him in January, I'm like, hey, I hope the move to North Carolina went great. And
Yep.
like he probably, maybe whether or not he thought I remember that, to me it doesn't matter, but it's just like a personal thing, like
Yeah.
that, like I paid attention, right, to what he
Yeah.
said. And so when you take notes and you use a CRM in that way, So it's not only about like the accuracy, like, yes, I 100% agree. It's also about the little things people say and having a place to record all those notes, because no one is 100% perfect memory and can
Right.
remember everything. Although I know some people that are pretty impressive.
Yeah. No.
I'm not one of them. My memory is short-term memory is not so great sometimes, but uh, maybe that's my as I'm getting older. But the point being is that it's a great place to kind of put those little picadillos of those notes in and have them at your resource.
Yeah, it's a great resource. It reminds me of the episode of The Office where I think Dwight Schrute stole Michael Scott's index cards and was like reading all the personal notes on the back, but they were
Yeah.
all like, cryptic and reversed but it was so Michael knew like, oh, this person has 7 kids and their kids are named whatever, whatever,
Right.
whatever, and so putting that information in there gives you the ability to reach out and be personable and say, how's little Tommy doing in T-ball, and
Yeah.
that kind of a thing, which I think goes a super long way.
Absolutely.
So yeah, listen, real quick, so we don't run out of time. A couple of random rapid fire questions.
Sure.
The first is, what's something that you are binging the heck out of these days? A book, a show, a podcast, a hobby, something you just can't get enough of.
Oh, that's a good one. So, oh man, there's a lot of them. I just finished. Oh man, you're putting me on the spot here, Steve. Um, oh man, what was it called? There's all right, I would say I'll just go with Netflix and Paramount to say as like a platform, because I wish I could recall the show that I just finished, but yeah, my wife and I like we like the dark sort of humor, dark comedy stuff, or things that are like a little off color. So
Mhm.
there's like not always a lot of good content like that online. Some of it's like kind of cheesy. So when we find a show we like it's like we just bitch through that so quickly. We're like, what? There's no more seasons? Like, all right, now we got to find another one. So,
Yeah.
we're watching the one now with Ray Romano and Lisa Kudrow.
Oh yeah.
I
Yeah.
think it's called like No Good Things or something like that,
No
which
Good
is
Deeds. Yeah.
No
Looks
Good
pretty
Deeds,
good.
which is kind of interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. What is a tool that you recently integrated into your life, whether it's business or personal, that you look back and you're like, how did I live without this thing before? And it could be digital or physical or, a mechanical
Oh,
thing.
that's a good one too. Okay, so I'll do one of each. So on the business side of things, there's two tools that I use like almost daily. One is Built With, which for like agencies out there, I think is actually a really good tool to know about if they don't know. And it's a Chrome plugin. It tells you what technology is installed on a website.
Yep.
So that's a really good one. And another one I like is Email Hunter, which is basically a tool where, if those don't know about it, you pull up a website, you click the little Chrome plugin, and it tells you all of the known people that work for the company and their email address. And at the very least, it tells you what the most likely format is for their email address
The
in
structure.
that
Yeah.
corporation. So that's a pretty helpful tool if you don't know somebody's email. Um, on the personal side, I will tell you that I have an iPhone, so having Siri create reminders for me, specifically with dates and times,
Hmm.
in my personal life has been phenomenal.
Yep.
So because I generally just jot things down as much as I use a CRM. I still have my pen and paper and write things down there, and so yeah. I'll be like in the car at the gym. I'll be like, oh, I need to do this. And I'll just be like, hey, Siri, put this,
Yep.
a note on my reminder. And so that's been
That's a
really,
lifesaver.
that is a lifesaver. Yeah, for
Yeah.
sure. Yeah.
And then finally, what is a piece of business advice that you would give to Jason 20 years ago,
Oh,
other than
I think it would
invest
be,
in Apple?
yeah, I think it would be to what we were just talking about the whole like ego thing, thinking you know everything.
Hmm.
So, 20 years ago, I was in my 20s, and um, I was what they call skillpreneur. Like I was a graphic designer,
Hmm.
working at agencies in the city and in Manhattan. And I started to decide, oh, let me go out on my own. Like I'm doing this freelance thing. Let me turn it into a business. But I knew nothing about really running a business. And so over the years, I started working with business consultants, advisors, and other people, that taught me a lot. Had I done that probably like much earlier in my career, as a business operator,
Yep.
I would have definitely fast forwarded like the growth, for
Yeah.
sure. Had I done that. Yeah.
Yeah. Ask for help. I get it. Yeah. We don't know what we don't know. So we got to lean into people that have been there before us. So, Jason, thank you so much for joining me. We'll have links to the profit path in the show notes, along with the coupon code for listeners. That's the Google Sheet CRM system machine that you've built, as well as to Cultivize for the ebooks about lead scoring and all of your other content.
So if I can just add really quickly, if anybody listening wants to go to afterthelead.com, that's where they'll have access to all the things that we spoke about. And the coupon code, which will be in the show notes, I'm going to put up as Agency Bytes. So you just put in Agency Bytes as the code, and then you save $50 off of that $199 profit path tool.
Awesome. Jason, thank you so much for joining us,
Steve.
Sharing your wisdom with us, and appreciate your time.
My pleasure.
Thanks again for tuning in to Agency Bytes. If you know someone with expert knowledge on a topic that agency owners would love to hear about, go to agencyoutsight.com/podcast-guest and nominate them.